The retired teacher thought nobody remembered her. Then a black limousine stopped in front of her small house, and the man who stepped out would change her life forever. My name is Margaret Wilson. I am 74 years old. I spent 42 years working as a high school English teacher in Chicago, Illinois. And the day a billionaire knocked on my front door was the day I learned that kindness can travel through decades before finding its way back home. Retirement wasn't what I expected, not because it was difficult, because it was quiet, very quiet. For decades, my days had been filled with students, questions, essays, class discussions, school events, laughter, chaos, life. Then suddenly, none of it was there anymore. The classrooms belonged to younger teachers. The hallways belonged to new generations. And I belonged to memory. At least that's how it felt sometimes. I lived alone in a modest little house on the west side of Chicago. Nothing fancy, just comfortable. A small porch, a tiny garden, a bookshelf in nearly every room. Thousands of books. Enough books to fill several classrooms, which made sense. Teaching had never been just a job for me. It had been my purpose. Even after retirement, I still woke up early, still read every day, still made lesson plans sometimes, just for fun. Old habits stay with you, unfortunately. People don't always stay. At first, former students visited occasionally, sent cards, sent messages, stopped by to say hello. But years passed. Lives became busy. Families grew. Careers developed. The visits became less frequent, then rarer, then almost non-existent. I understood. Life moves forward. That's what it's supposed to do. Still, some days felt lonely, especially after my husband Robert Wilson passed away. Robert and I had spent 48 wonderful years together. He understood me better than anyone. After he was gone, the house felt larger, quieter, emptier. I filled the silence with books, gardening, volunteering. But some evenings remained difficult. One particular evening changed everything. A rainy Thursday in October, cold, gray. The kind of evening that encourages reflection. I was sitting on my porch, reading an old novel, wrapped in a blanket, watching rain slide across the street, when my mailbox caught my attention. Empty. Again. No letters, no cards, no messages, nothing. I laughed softly, then shook my head. Because retirement sometimes feels like disappearing slowly. Not completely, just enough to notice. The next morning, I visited a grocery store, a small neighborhood market, the kind where employees know your name. I bought vegetables, bread, tea, a few necessities. Nothing unusual. Then I reached the checkout counter. A young cashier smiled politely, scanned my items, then suddenly paused. She looked at me closely, very closely, almost as if she recognized me. "Excuse me?" she said carefully. "Were you ever a teacher at Lincoln High School?" I smiled. Her eyes widened immediately. "Oh my goodness. You taught my mother." I laughed. "Really?" The young woman nodded enthusiastically. Then she said something beautiful. "My mother always said you changed her life." For a moment, I didn't know what to say, because teachers rarely see the long-term impact of their work. We plant seeds, then life carries students elsewhere, most of the time. We never learn what grows. I thanked her, finished shopping, and walked home, feeling surprisingly emotional. One small comment, one simple memory, yet it brightened my entire week. I had no idea it was only the beginning. 3 days later, everything changed. Completely. A black limousine appeared outside my house, the largest vehicle ever seen on my street. Neighbors immediately noticed. Curtains moved. Doors opened. People stared, including me. because I had absolutely no idea why a limousine would stop in front of my home. The driver exited first. Professional. Serious. Then another man stepped out. Tall. Confident. Expensively dressed. The kind of person who looked familiar without explanation. For several seconds, I couldn't place him. Then he removed his sunglasses, and suddenly, I recognized the eyes. Not the suit. Not the expensive watch. Not the billionaire standing in front of me. The eyes. The same eyes belonging to a quiet, 14-year-old boy who once sat in the back row of my classroom. My heart nearly stopped, because standing on my porch was Ethan Carter, a student I hadn't seen in nearly 30 years. A student everyone had forgotten. A student who had become one of the youngest billionaires in America. And the first thing he said left me completely speechless. "Mrs. Wilson, I've been looking for you for 5 years." The billionaire had spent 5 years searching for his old teacher. But when he finally found her, the reason brought tears to everyone's eyes. "My name is Margaret Wilson. I am 74 years old. I spent 42 years working as a high school English teacher in Chicago, Illinois. And the day my former student, Ethan Carter, stood on my porch was the day I discovered that one forgotten act of kindness can echo across an entire lifetime." For several seconds, I simply stared at him. Not because of the expensive suit. Not because of the limousine. Not because newspapers occasionally called him one of America's youngest billionaires. I stared because all I could see was the shy teenager from room 204. The boy who always sat near the window. The boy who rarely spoke. The boy everyone underestimated. Including himself, Ethan. My voice trembled slightly. He smiled. The same smile. Older. More confident. But still unmistakably Ethan Carter. "Hello, Mrs. Wilson." Then something unexpected happened. The billionaire stepped forward and hugged me. Not a formal handshake. Not a business greeting. A genuine hug. The kind given by someone carrying years of gratitude. When he stepped back, I noticed tears in his eyes. Real tears. And suddenly I realized this visit wasn't about business. It was personal. Very personal. I invited him inside. The neighbors practically exploded with curiosity. Several were openly watching from their windows. Honestly, I couldn't blame them. A billionaire arriving at a retired teacher's house wasn't exactly ordinary. We sat in the living room, the same living room where I spent countless evenings reading books. The same living room where Robert and I spent decades together. Ethan looked around quietly, studying family photographs, bookshelves, memories. Then he smiled. "It feels exactly how I imagined." I laughed softly. "You imagined my living room?" He nodded. More seriously than expected, for a moment. He seemed nervous, as though he had rehearsed this meeting many times. Finally, he reached into his jacket pocket, removed a folded piece of paper, and handed it to me. The paper looked old, very old, worn around the edges, protected carefully, almost treasured. I unfolded it slowly, then my heart stopped, because I recognized it immediately. It was an essay written nearly 30 years earlier, one of my classroom assignments. The title sat at the top, "Who I Want to Become," and beneath it, a 14-year-old Ethan Carter's handwriting. I stared silently, trying to understand. Why would he still have this? Why carry it for 3 decades? Then he answered the question before I asked. "You gave this back to me." I nodded. Of course I did. Teachers return assignments every day, thousands of them. He pointed toward the bottom, toward a note written in red ink. My handwriting, a message I didn't even remember writing. I read it slowly, You are far more. Don't let other people decide your future. One day you will surprise everyone. I sat quietly because those words seemed ordinary. The kind of encouragement teachers write all the time. Then Ethan spoke. That note saved my life. The room became completely silent. I looked up, certain I had misunderstood, but I hadn't. He continued. When I was 14, everything was falling apart. His voice grew softer, more emotional. My father had left. My mother worked 2 jobs. We were being evicted. I was failing classes. I honestly believed I was worthless. My chest tightened because I remembered pieces of it. Not all of it, just enough. Enough to remember a struggling boy, a lonely boy, a frightened boy. Ethan looked down at the essay, then continued. I wrote that assignment in 10 minutes. I didn't care. I didn't believe any of it mattered. He paused, then smiled sadly. But you did. Tears filled my eyes, because suddenly I remembered. The conference, the meeting after class, the conversations, the encouragement, the extra attention, small moments, moments I barely remembered, moments he never forgot. Then Ethan revealed the truth behind everything, the truth behind his success, the truth behind this visit. He said, that night, I read your note at least 20 times. Another pause. Then, it was the first time an adult told me I could become something. I couldn't speak. Not immediately. Because no teacher expects to hear words like that. Not 30 years later. Not after retirement. Not after believing they had been forgotten. Then Ethan told me what happened next. He studied harder, not overnight. Not perfectly. Slowly, one step at a time, one class at a time, one goal at a time. Eventually, he earned a scholarship, then college, then graduate school, then a small technology company, then another, then another. Success built upon success. Failure taught lessons. Lessons created opportunities. And eventually, those opportunities created billions. But throughout every stage, he carried that paper, the essay, the note, the reminder, the proof that someone once believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. I wiped away tears, then asked the question that had been bothering me since he arrived. Ethan, why spend 5 years looking for me? He smiled, then gave an answer I will never forget. Because I owed you a thank you. I laughed through tears. A thank you. He nodded, then looked around the room, slowly, thoughtfully, and said, no, actually, I owe you much more than that. Then he opened a leather briefcase, removed several documents, and placed them carefully on the coffee table. The moment I saw the documents, I realized this visit wasn't only about gratitude. It was about a promise Ethan had apparently been planning for years. And what those papers contained would change my life forever. The retired teacher thought the visit was simply a thank you. But the documents on her coffee table revealed something far bigger. Something her former student had been planning for years. My name is Margaret Wilson. I am 74 years old. I spent 42 years working as a high school English teacher in Chicago, Illinois. And the day my former student returned as a billionaire was the day I learned that kindness never truly disappears. The leather briefcase sat on my coffee table, closed, mysterious, important. Ethan looked at it quietly, then looked at me, as though trying to find the right words. Finally, he opened it. Inside sat several folders, neatly organized, professionally prepared, legal documents, financial documents, property documents, the kind of paperwork that usually changes lives. I immediately became nervous because I had no idea what was happening. Ethan, what is all this? He smiled softly, then answered, A promise. A promise. The word confused me even more, because I didn't remember making any promises, and I certainly didn't remember asking for anything. He picked up one folder, opened it, then slid it across the table. I looked down and froze, because the first page contained my name, Margaret Wilson, large letters, official documents. My hands started trembling. "What is this?" Ethan leaned back, then spoke carefully. 5 years ago, I created a foundation. I listened quietly, still confused. The foundation supported education, scholarships, libraries, school improvement programs, teacher support initiatives. Thousands of students had already benefited. Hundreds of teachers had received grants. The foundation was one of his proudest achievements. Then he smiled, but something was missing. I frowned. What? His answer arrived immediately. The person who inspired it. I stared at him, unable to respond, because suddenly I knew where this conversation was heading, and it terrified me. Not because it was bad, because it was overwhelming. Ethan opened another folder, then another, then another. Finally, he revealed the entire plan. The foundation's newest educational center, a state-of-the-art learning campus, reading programs, technology labs, scholarship offices, teacher training facilities, everything, all located in one place. One extraordinary place. Then, Ethan pointed toward the building name printed across the proposal. I looked down and immediately burst into tears, because written across the top, in large bold letters, were 4 words. The Margaret Wilson Center. The room disappeared. At least it felt that way. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't speak, because nobody expects something like that. Especially not a retired teacher. Especially not one who thought she had been forgotten. "Ethan," my voice broke. "You named it after me." He nodded, without hesitation, without embarrassment, without apology. Then he said something that shattered whatever composure I had left. "You changed my future. Why shouldn't your name help change other futures too?" I cried openly. No point pretending otherwise. The emotion was simply too much, because teachers rarely witness the long-term results of their work. Most of us never know. We hope, we wonder, but we rarely know. And in that moment, I knew. Then Ethan revealed the second surprise. The surprise he had kept secret from everyone, including the foundation board, including the media, including me. A permanent scholarship fund, millions of dollars, dedicated to helping students facing hardship. Students who felt invisible, students who doubted themselves. Students exactly like Ethan once had been. The scholarship carried a name too. The Margaret Wilson Belief Award. I laughed through tears, because the name sounded far too important, far too grand, far too much. But Ethan disagreed, completely. He pointed toward the old essay still sitting on the coffee table. The same essay, the same note, the same red ink. Then he said, "Most people invest money. You invested belief." The room became silent again, because those words carried extraordinary truth. Money matters. Resources matter. Opportunities matter. But belief matters too, sometimes more. Especially for a child who has none. A few weeks later, the center officially opened. The event attracted journalists, educators, business leaders, students, families, hundreds of people. I stood on a stage, still struggling to believe any of it was real. Then Ethan approached the podium, the billionaire everyone came to hear, the successful entrepreneur, the famous businessman. The person newspapers celebrated. But when he spoke, he didn't talk about wealth, or business, or success. Instead, he held up a single piece of paper, an old paper, a worn paper, a school essay, 30 years old. The audience watched curiously. Then Ethan told the story of a struggling 14-year-old boy. The story of one teacher. The story of a simple note written in red ink. By the time he finished, many people were crying, including reporters, including business executives, including students, because everyone understood the lesson. Never underestimate encouragement. Never underestimate kindness. Never underestimate the impact of believing in someone. Years later, the center continues helping students. Thousands of them. Scholarships continue changing lives. Teachers continue receiving support. Children continue finding opportunities. And every time I visit, I stop beside a small plaque near the entrance. A plaque Ethan insisted on installing. The plaque contains the same words I once scribbled quickly on a teenager's essay. Words I barely remembered writing. Words he never forgot. You are far more capable than you believe. Those words now greet every student who enters. Every single day. And perhaps that is the greatest reward any teacher could ever receive. Not money, not recognition, not fame, but proof. Proof that kindness matters. Proof that encouragement matters. Proof that even the smallest act can echo across decades. Because in the end, the billionaire didn't return to repay a debt. He returned to honor the person who helped him believe he had a future. The end. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story, because one kind word today may become someone else's success story tomorrow.